Special correspondent Julia Chapman reports.
Over to Moscow now. Julia Chapman is there for us.
Julia Chapman is there, and she has the latest on the situation.
We are hearing already the reports coming through from Ukraine of some action already being taken. There have been explosions reported in a number of cities around Ukraine, not just in the east, not in the Donbass, but in fact in Odessa, Mariupol, and in Kharkiv in the north, and Kiev itself. So very alarming news this morning. This will inevitably go down in history as being an incredibly significant day for both Russia and the world. A very different version of events being put forward by Russia to those we've been hearing from officials locally there in Ukraine. Arguably, nobody knows better than Moscow the dangers of interfering with nuclear power plants.
Julia Chapman is in Moscow. And Julia, explain to us what's likely to be the implications of this new law.
Well, the law has been passed by both houses of parliament. It's now waiting for President Vladimir Putin's signature. And if he signs it, it will mean that any individual can be punished with up to 15 years in prison for putting forward a version of events in Ukraine different to the ones that the media here in Russia are putting forward and the Ministry of Defense is offering to the public. The Ukrainians have taken advantage of that element of surprise and made pretty significant gains, their biggest ones since the early days of the invasion.
In neighboring Bucha, hundreds of buildings have been damaged. Rebuilding them will take time, but as temperatures drop, some repairs are urgent.
This is one of dozens of boilers in Bucha being replaced in time for winter. Russian attacks disconnected the city from Ukraine's gas network, damaging the entire heating system here.
Reporter Julia Chapman has the latest.
There has been another strike today on the city of Kryvyi Rih, where we understand that more critical infrastructure has been hit. An industrial facility in that city attacked in the latest strike, and it comes after 8 cruise missiles were launched by Russia yesterday. Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, speaking in his press conference this afternoon in Vilnius, said that membership was not about a timeline, it was about meeting conditions.
As hard as it is to believe for those of us looking from the outside, it's unlikely to make much of a difference or move the dial at all when it comes to Russian politics. We're very unlikely to see floods of people taking to the streets in protest. Protesting has become very challenging and very dangerous for anybody that is trying to oppose the Kremlin inside Russia. It's always been difficult, but because of the war in Ukraine, now more so than ever.
The U.S. State Department says this decision has simply been taken out of an abundance of caution, but it does say that Russia could take military action at any time. I think the most important takeaway from Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is that this isn't the end of dialogue. The Kremlin barely acknowledges that Alexei Navalny exists. Russian President Vladimir Putin has never publicly said his name. This facility was built during Russia's first wave of coronavirus, but it wasn't until the second that it became necessary to use it. At the moment, it's full to about 50% of capacity, but the number of cases is quickly rising.
At a hospital outside Moscow, protective gear is washed for reuse, and many of the doctors here believe they too have been hung out to dry.
Russian officials say the number of cases is so high because of widespread testing. More than 6 million tests have been carried out for coronavirus. Only the U.S. has done more. In Tomsk, hospital beds are filling up, even as authorities open more dedicated facilities like this one. The Delta variant is simply spreading faster than the population can be convinced to get vaccinated. This year's forest fires wreaked devastation across vast swathes of the region, but most of them didn't come near human settlements. These delicate threads have long held together Uzbekistan's economy. Under Soviet rule, this was the cotton capital of the Union, responsible for clothing citizens from Central Asia to the Baltics. Picking cotton is grueling work, and for decades it was carried out under a program of forced labor. So important was this so-called white gold to the Soviet and then Uzbek economies that even children weren't exempt from taking part in the harvest. In the place where Hikmat Ziadullayev was born, only the trees remain standing. Generations of his family lived in a home that was destroyed here last year. We've had to come into a metro underpass because the police presence is so heavy outside. They're completely blocking the road. I'm Julia Chapman in Vladivostok, and I'll be telling you what's at stake for Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as North Korea tries to widen its support base amid an impasse with the US over denuclearization. Here in Moscow, there's little sign that Russia is heeding NATO's warning, instead accusing the West of spreading hysteria.